Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, the agenda, the show where we look ahead to our upcoming episode. I'm Marcus Lowth, and joining me as he does every week is Steve Mera. Now, Steve, this week's show is going to be an absolute cracker. We're speaking with paranormal researcher and investigator Caroline McKendrick-GIBSON. Now, as
Mm.
well as researching paranormal cases, she's got an history with the police and she does stuff to do with true crime. So, one of the first things I want to kind of get into with, similar to how we spoke with Trey Hudson, is can she take some of those skills and transfer them into paranormal research? I think that'd be interesting to
You
find
you
out.
really can, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, certainly you can adopt areas of the type of research you're doing and put it into different topics. Paranormal research is broken down into several different topics. I mean, you've got your general run-of-the-mill ghost groups and organizations, and I'm fine with them, but it's really for entertainment purposes because most of them are just kind of, it's thrill seeking. They want to get the next best photo, the next best video. But really, sometimes people are reaching out sometimes because they're having traumatic experiences. And I often think, where does it leave those people, those witnesses? I mean, are they geared to be able to help with people who are having traumatic experiences? What can they do? No one can walk into a building, as far as I'm aware, and say, yes, I'm going to get rid of it. It just,
Mm.
no matter how many TV shows you might see, I just don't see that ever in my research over 41 years. Yes, sometimes there can be suppression, quiet spells, but sometimes there's a return. I don't know if we really hold that, that gear that we can say, yes, we're going to get rid of it because it seems like they have the upper hand. But then there is a bit more of a sort of that area of paranormal investigation, which is a bit more scientific, which I really thumbs up to these guys that do that because they're like me and yourself. They're trying to push forward and get new information and advance the subject because it can't stay static for much longer. It's drive us crazy. Trying to get answers as to not what's kind of happening because it's just another stone to the mountain we've already got, but how does it do it and why does it do it? Why are certain people are targeted by phenomena? So the scientific endeavor to try and find out answers, I'm all up for that scientific approach. And of course, then you've got the real scientists, which
Mm.
are at the top end, which are conducting experiments and stuff. And you don't get to hear much about that, unfortunately. It's usually pretty closed doors, unless you're in the inner circle, should you say, to
Yeah.
get to find out. But paranormal research, from the 1600s, and we're still going at it. Very little has been obtained through normal processes, but over the last 20 years, I'm seeing a lot of new stuff come forward, new types of equipment, new data, and
Mm.
new areas of research, which I think is good to get into because we're not getting any answers from just the old methods anymore, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a few things there that internet that make me think. You talked about like TV shows, for example, and yeah, it's fun, and there's been a few famous ones where it's clear that there's been some hoaxing
Oh yeah.
around, you know what I mean, and it's
Oh
quite clear to
yeah.
everybody. But it'd
Yeah.
be interesting though, like you say, because if on these occasions where people go in and say, right, I've cleared that house and it's all gone now,
Yeah.
um, like you say, it'd be interesting to keep data on those type. Does it come back? If so, when does it come back?
Well, we
Why does
don't
it come
get
back?
that, do we, mate? We
No,
just
this is
don't get
it.
that. We get TV shows and saying, okay, well, we've moved it on or we've sent it
Mm,
to the light and all these wonderful sayings. We don't tend to go back to Mr. and Mrs. Smith 3, 4 months later, though, to,
exactly.
to get
Yeah.
a bit of an update.
Mm,
Sometimes these things can just vacate.
yeah.
We know that. They can vacate and be suppressed. I mean, we waited one out once and it took 5 days. And now the stuff was going on periodically, 6, 7 times. It's high frequency, high severity case going on in one day. There were many
Mm,
incidents. But we came in, we did what we did, and it just went disappeared for 5 days. But you know
mm,
what? We stuck in there. But after the fifth day, it returned. It was like a bit of a waiting game situation going on.
yeah.
So you can't always sort of just suggest, yes, it's over with, because I do think that these things can just go where they want to go. Sometimes they're attracted to people and homes, but it doesn't mean that they're tethered. I think sometimes they
Yeah.
can bilocate and then come back again in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, that leads nicely into you were talking about different areas of research, and quantum physics, quantum mechanics is obviously going to be of importance to all of this. But as you say, I mean, one thing to consider is 5 days for us. Time might exist completely differently in whatever realm this intelligence is existing in, and so these things, even
Absolutely.
that you could have gaps of years, and yet these occurrences could stop, start happening again. I mean, I was watching something by TV standards. It was a good documentary, actually. It was about
Yeah.
things about grey friars in Scotland, some kind of
All right.
poltergeist case there, and this guy was researching it. He said his flat burnt down, but all the other apartments around it didn't. So, it was interesting stuff. But they kind of wrapped it up all too neatly. He just kind of said, "Yeah, well, I stopped researching it, and the poltergeist is happy, and it's all stopped." And I thought, well, I just that weren't good enough for me.
No,
You know
it's
what I
just
mean?
yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's just not concluded, is it,
No,
really?
no,
I mean, though poltergeist phenomena, I mean, true poltergeist phenomena is pretty rare. I mean, I've only dealt with 6 or 7 investigations in 41 years compared to
mm.
hauntings,
Yeah,
which are
yeah,
up to about almost 1,000. So
yeah,
you can see statistically there, when you're out there doing the work all over the years, it's pretty rare. However, if you go onto kind of YouTube and things, everybody's got a poltergeist these days, and you don't know what's true and what isn't half the
no,
time.
no, you
But
don't.
real poltergeist disturbances, yeah, I think they're pretty rare. There's usually a set of conditions, environmental conditions with some poltergeists
Right.
that they are tethered to trauma, upset. People are living in poor conditions, family issues, financial issues, just poor living conditions, things like that. That has been noted right from the Enfield days and other cases. However, it's not a rule of thumb. It's not written in stone. People used to say this. The Society of Psychical Research actually put it out. Actually, a journal of psychical research said that it was all down to the focus, the catalyst. It has to
Yeah,
be. You're sometimes more a girl than a boy,
yeah, yeah. I was about to
usually in the
say, yeah,
adolescent age, and they are some type of uncontrolled form of PK. That I was happy to go with for quite a number of years until we realised on some of the investigations
mm,
that we're privy to, we relocated everybody from the home and
yeah,
it's still the phenomena persisted. So it wasn't reliable, any catalyst. There has been poltergeist cases where there's no children around. It's
yeah,
sometimes it's in businesses, in even a warehouse. If
yeah,
we
yeah,
talk with Paul Sinclair, who did an incredible investigation, was poltergeist stuff taking place in a factory warehouse of all things, where there was just gentlemen, elderly guys just working. Really,
yeah,
nothing
yeah.
unusual, but yeah, it was poltergeist phenomena.
I mean, it's as you say as well. I mean, people tend to think that poltergeists remain where they manifest. Whether it's in the home or in a factory or wherever it is. But as rare as these cases are, there's plenty of examples of these things, whatever they are, following families when they move. I mean, I forget the
Oh yeah.
name, so I apologize for this, but there was a case in America, and I think wherever this poltergeist, whatever it was, it started off with fires occurring in the house. And wherever
Yes.
the guy moved to, more fires. It was just so strange. And obviously, it was following him. And I think Malcolm Robinson, who we spoke to before, I'm sure he documented a case where
Yeah.
the poltergeist followed. It might have been the associate poltergeist case. So
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
is
They do.
certainly
They
more
do.
to this than just
Yeah.
wrapping it up in a nice, neat package.
It's got sometimes it's definitely got a tether to some people in the home, not necessarily always children, of course.
Mm,
And they have tried to escape it. I mean, just two things to point out. I did an poltergeist type case in Leicester,
right,
maybe about 10 years ago now. And they were incendiary effects, things which were combusting, just
right.
burning for no, apparently a dog bed went up,
Yeah,
edges of chairs and shelves, the fireplace, picture frames on the wall. It was just crazy. So I mean, nobody really ever talks about, spontaneous combustion anymore.
no, no.
And maybe that's a topic we'll get into at some point because I
Yeah.
just do not think it's been ever properly concluded. But is it tied in with poltergeist disturbances? It's a pretty strange one. And about
Mm,
phenomena, following them, there was an incident in Yorkshire
right.
in the early 1990s, and they'd had this disturbances of poltergeist phenomena, and they'd done the homework, to be honest with you, and they thought every time we talk about something, it's always those things that disappears. Like, we'll talk about, oh, where's that important piece of that letter came gone? So it's as
Right.
if it's in the background listening and doing stuff. And they did a bit of research and realised that, do you know what? I wonder if we can move and just, because it was a rented accommodation.
Right.
So they decided to thought, okay, let's move, but they had a little meeting outside the house.
I'm with
Let's
you.
not talk about moving. Let's say nothing. Let's have no conversations. Let's just very quietly load up the van and do one.
Right.
And that was okay until the day they were moving and they got this van outside and they're saying nothing. It's all very strategic and they're just lifting stuff out, not even any conversations or nothing. And they were putting the last parts of bits into the van. And the neighbour comes out from next door and talks to this woman who was called Janice.
Right.
She said, "Hey, Janice, are you moving?" Right? And she's like, and before she could even get out to say anything, behind her from the empty house, the front door was open. A bellowed voice came out and it said, "Yes, they're flitting."
Wow. Wow.
And he went, "Bloody hell, right, tools down, it's not going to work, this sort of thing." And you know what? And it didn't. And it did follow them for a couple of times, actually, a couple of different moves, strangely enough.
It's that's just insane. That actually, it sounds like the script of a comedy film.
It
But I mean,
really does. I mean, this
it's
voice was a
because
rasping male voice and it just bellowed out. And the neighbor heard it as well. He said, "Yes, they're flitting." And she's like, "What the hell?" So
uh,
yeah, it caught them off guard, all right. But they
yeah,
did learn something from this. It's very, very difficult to trick the tricksters, should we say.
yeah, it'd have been interesting actually. That it'd have been interesting to see. Was it the old lady next door that brought it to to this ghost's attention, or
Yeah.
did it know anyway? Can it read thoughts? I mean, again, it would have been an interesting experiment to continue
It
somehow. Actually,
really was. All they
Hmm.
wanted to do is just get some respite from the phenomena. But they moved into another rented accommodation. It followed them, and it did this a couple of times. I think by the time they did the second or third move, things sort of just quietened down. But
Hmm.
sometimes you just cannot. There's no shortcut of getting away from these things. Sometimes.
Yeah, it's like you said. I mean, you might think you've got away from it. It might just be a period of rest or whatever, and that rest could go on for years. But to this phenomenon, like you say, it could just be a matter of minutes. But what comes up in my mind there, though, is when we spoke to Debbie Cartwright a few weeks ago about Djinn, and she was saying then, wasn't she, about don't leave anything behind, no DNA, it might attach it. So it's again a little similarity to what people are kind of witnessing with poltergeists there.
Really is. When it comes to Jinn, it seems to be like they're strongly tethered to things. Jinn.
Mm, mm,
I've only come across one case which I investigated, and that was a Jinn case,
yeah,
and that was in all places in Ireland when I was with Barry.
yeah,
And it was an old rundown place, what was it called? Leashfield Hall or something like that. It's a manor, and it's very old, and it's been completely abandoned because of the disturbance there. But then, what happened was the person that owned the home during the Second World War brought Egyptian mummies in, and obviously
right,
illegally, but had a
yeah,
bit of a museum there, and one of these things was tethered to it to some of the stuff there, and all hell broke loose, and he actually brought in priests. They couldn't rid it, and it just ransacked. People were injured, so he just literally just left it as it was, intact, just abandoned. And
yeah,
what happened was is that the the local nature, the trees and things, literally just consumed the place.
right,
Now
yeah,
I went back there, and this thing is still there. It's noted to be still there. And I was a bit, well, is it, what's going on, is it? But you
right.
know what? There was definitely a very strong presence. And even some of the recording equipment picked up sort of strange sounds and grunts and moving around. And there was definitely something happening there. And this is supposed to be still connected with the Jinn, be honest
Right.
with you. Now, all the artifacts have relocated now to museums and things throughout Ireland. But it didn't seem to bilocate, as far as I'm aware, to where these items are. It stayed at the hall. People occasionally still visit that place because of the disturbances, but they treat it a little bit differently because Jinn can attach themselves quite easily, apparently,
Yeah.
to the individual. So it's one of them where you don't peel it up, you don't peel it off because it might just track back home with you, and you don't want one of them things in your house.
No, no. I mean, like I say, I mean, I've never encountered one, but like you say, it sounds like a poltergeist times 10, basically. So,
It really was. Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I can believe it. It's interesting about the Egyptian connection there as well, because I mean, you got to take all this stuff with a pinch of salt. But what I'm about to say, but there's loads of cursed mummies, cursed this and that and the other. Now, a lot of that stuff, like the Tutankhamun, a lot of that's been exaggerated and it's kind of been explained away as bacteria, but
Yeah.
that's not the only one. There are other kind of like little curses, and it makes you wonder
Well,
what.
I mean, if you talk about, you go back to even just like voodoo dolls and things, or
Yeah, yeah,
voodoo,
mm,
I don't think it is, in fact, it is that these dolls are cursed, or, I think it's the belief in them,
mm,
because hoodoo curses only really work if you really believe in them. And there are
yeah,
some societies that will take that absolutely verbatim. In other words, yes, these things are absolutely real. And if suddenly they find something, some we've wrapped up hell of their own hair and this, that, and the other around a doll, and it's on the doorstep, whatever, they will experience real bad phenomena. And the
mm,
thing is that I'm wondering if it's brought on by their own belief to some degree, giving birth like a tulpa and things like that.
yeah, yeah.
So sometimes I think we're involved in it, sometimes even not knowingly in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point there. I mean, about voodoo. I mean, voodoo and hoodoo. I've read a bit of the research. I forget the guy's name again. I apologize, but he did a lot of research in the 80s, I believe, and he found out that to create zombies, they were using certain types of drugs.
Drugs.
You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
kind of like basically mimic death, but you were still alive. I can't explain it
It,
like you could.
it's an old tradition actually, because
Yeah,
what it
that's
did
exactly
is
right. Yeah,
it slowed the heart down so much they thought they passed away.
yeah,
But so they go and bury them, and then he'd come along only some hours later at night, because you can't, even with very, very slight shallow breathing,
mm,
you eventually would suffocate, wouldn't you?
yeah, yeah,
So he's back there at night and digging them up, and of course gets them out. And apparently there was a reversal, some type of reversal drug to some
yes, apparently
degree.
so because they
But
used it as punishment,
yeah.
didn't they? Back in ancient times, it was a bit. Yeah,
Absolutely. And of course, that ties in with people thinking in the belief of vampirism.
yeah,
And some of these people may have been alive, but they actually were killed in the coffins because they put stakes through and all
yeah,
sorts of
yeah,
different things. It's strange how mythology and belief gets very entangled with these sort of things. But you are right, yeah, there's definitely something in regarding utilizing some type of compounds and chemicals that can all literally mimic death to some degree, and which has
yeah.
been utilized absolutely.
But it's like you said though as well, and I'm just going to trail back to that about the belief, the power of belief in your own mind. So I'm wondering, is it a combination of certain chemicals maybe that are administered, or is it just like you say, you've seen this sort of thing, zombies, and then your own
Yeah.
mind. But and I do, but I've spoken about it before. Subconsciously, is it powerful enough to kind of maybe not create hallucinations, but just manifest something out of the energy that's around us all the
I
time
think so,
anyway?
yeah. I think there's definitely evidence of manifestation through. I mean, look, if you look at the Philip experiment that took place, now this was in Ontario in Canada, and I think it was 75 or something like that. But what people don't tend to know is that there was a team of physical and mental mediums that gave birth to an apparition, an intelligence. Now, it was all manufactured. They all decided to sit down and manufacture this ghost, his name being Philip, and his lifestyle and what he did and how he looked and how he behaved. Whole history about him. But over a short period of time, there were interactions, and to the point where literally this apparition, this spirit, was like any other, but manufactured in this case. But behind the scenes was scientists. Scientists were involved in this study, and they actually reached out to get a team of mediums, physical, mental mediums, spiritualists, that sort of thing, to be able to conduct this experiment. So they were very successful. So the evidence and the conclusion reached was, yes, if you believe in something and you put your energy and your thoughts and passion into something, a group of individuals, even possibly even one individual, if we talk about witchcraft and tulpa, it's
Yeah,
the same process, could manufacture something literally from the realms of nowhere. But it is intelligent and independent and acts alone. It's fascinating.
yeah, and like you say, I mean, if there's scientists behind this sort of thing, we really kind of, I understand that science, by its very nature, it progresses slowly. Obviously, if you want to be sure, it needs to be peer reviewed. I understand all that, but at the same time, they need to meet, paranormal research is halfway, really, because everything's magic until science explains it. Now, I'm not saying if
Yeah,
science explains it, it's all of a sudden mundane and, or it's all rational. I do think there'll still be something very anomalous about all this, but science will be able to say, well, this is kind of what it is, and
Yeah,
so
which
I think
yeah,
we need to see science meet us halfway there. Really.
we really do. I mean, we can chip away at the block to some degree to say, okay, all right, well, we're looking at paranormal physics, paranormal mechanics, what's the mechanism? How does it do
Mm,
what it does? And you start to get little clues as to the mechanism. And okay, this is really interesting when you look at overall cases around the world. But you do need science, yeah. You can't just, we've got to start dropping a bit more this belief and the myth about things. We've got to look at it a bit more with scientific data because we've got to get answers. And I think the only way forward now is not in the mythology, it's not in belief, folklore, tales, and legends. It's got to be some type of scientific endeavor to try and understand not just what these things are, but how. How did they do what they do? Where's the energy? Where did they get the energy
mm.
from to move items? Because it all uses energy,
Yeah, yeah,
and some apparitions, they're non-interactive, so they call them residual energy,
yeah.
residual hauntings. Or is that a haunting? Or is it just a recorded event? What is a haunting? Is it really a haunting? I say interactive or intelligent, they are hauntings where they're interacting with you or in your environment, then that's different. That is completely different than seeing a recorded event of, say, ghosts in a battlefield and
Mm,
things like that. It's like a
mm.
replay of events. But to witness it just off the cuff, you probably wouldn't know until you start getting into the nitty gritty about what the encounter consisted of.
Yeah, and I think the important thing there is the accumulation of data, because the
Yeah.
more data, even if it's something that, like you say, you witness something that were a bit strange, not quite sure what it was, so you just make a note of that at the time, blah 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 blah. Blah. Eventually, you start to see patterns.
Do.
Hopefully so.
Yeah.
And from those, you'll start, it's basic kind of science in itself. You start to formulate theories, and then you
Yeah.
start to try and prove those theories. So yeah, I think we've all got a part to play, but I think the important thing is, initially at least, is data, more and more data. So eventually someone can come along and say, you know what, this is what's happening here. And they'll just see it in theory. Who
Yeah.
knows?
And
But yeah, it's just accumulation of data, I think, is
I think
important.
the biggest problem is trying to understand where phenomena lies and how it actually works because not every stately home, manor house, or castle is haunted. Even
Oh,
in the
no.
UK, everybody we might think that, oh God, they're all haunted. No, they're not. Most of the apparitions that are seen throughout the UK are referred to as white ladies or grey ladies. In
Right,
fact, you talk about the haunting of, Anne Boleyn. You
right.
know, I mean, if we were to believe what people are saying, she's haunts about 6, 7 different places in the UK simultaneously.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not really, there's no rule of thumb. Sometimes it can be quite a modern house. I've
Oh, yeah.
investigated modern houses, which are only been within 10, 15 years old. They're built on a place where there's no pre-existing dwellings. Um, there's no prehistory in that location,
Mm,
and yet you've got Second World War soldiers being seen in a 10 or 15-year-old home. And you just don't make that connection. And so, yeah, when you're not making that connection, you just got to say, well, it's translocational then. Maybe they can just move where they want to move.
mm.
Because some things are definitely locational. You see an apparition of an old man that once passed away in that building, then
Yeah, yeah.
you've got some history to say, well, this is localized. There's a connection involved. But if you remove the house, do you remove the phenomena, or is it like trapping a fly in a glass? It's
Mm,
and I've even, believe it or not, I've done investigations for city councils throughout the United Kingdom, and there has been 2 or 3 occasions where there was a column effect haunting, and these were a series of like flats, apartments. They're
okay.
all identical, but they're stacked up on top of each other. But there were 3 different people, and it was exactly the same rooms that are being affected. And it was as
Right.
if there was a column of haunting phenomena passing through all 3 levels of
Uh-huh.
these homes. It was strange stuff that we find sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's something else we should speak to Caroline about. When we spoke to multiple researchers about this, locations. Obviously there's something about the locations, and it's not always as simple as you say. As well, someone used to live here hundreds of years ago, or there was a battle here. Sometimes, why
Yeah.
are these things coming? So, is it
Well,
portals? Is it
it,
gateways?
it could be. I mean, I think, people used to say it's trauma bled into the in a location. Now, it's not always trauma.
Mm.
because you think, oh well, it's a battlefield or some bad things happen there, and these are why these places are locked in with the land. Traumas caught up in the land somehow. But then there are some places where there are regular things which is residual, like these other places outside in these battlefields. But it's not bad things, it's good things. It's people enjoying themselves and laughing
Yeah.
and you suddenly burst into this room, there's nobody there, but over a period of time, these old inns and things, you can hear like 30 people laughing
Mm.
and
Mm.
having a good old chin wag and a knees up or whatever. And yet it's like, well, maybe it's not trauma, maybe it's heightened emotion. Because
Yeah.
heightened emotion can be both negative stuff,
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
wars and stuff, or sorrow and all that, but it can also be sort of that other end of the scale, which is in heightening, enjoyment and all that sort of a thing. It's pretty difficult. But you know what? When you talk about these locations, because I spent some time in Gettysburg
Mm.
on
Yeah.
Halloween, actually, of
Right.
all
Okay.
places.
That was-
But you know what? I didn't witness anything. I'm
Right.
not,
Okay.
I didn't see anything and witness anything. But there are plenty of stories that come out from those places. Things that might be trapped into the land. But if you take the story of the of Flight 401, wasn't it? And
Yeah. Yeah.
it
The two
crashed. The
pilots.
ghost,
Yep.
the ghost of Flight 401.
Yep.
It's a very well-known case, and it was this particular airline, this aircraft, it crashed, and the pilot that died. Parts of that aircraft we've reused on other
Yeah.
aircraft by that
Mm.
company, and it was those and only those aircraft utilised those parts, which was seeing this phantom captain from the
Yeah.
original wreck. And they had to sort of do something about it because the press got hold of it, and in big stories about it. Actually, even made it a film, a movie
Mm.
about it. Actually,
Mm.
it was very interesting how things could possibly be tethered to
Yeah.
incidents.
Yeah, like you said, it's a good example of that because, as you say, it was literally only appeared on planes where they recovered the
Yeah,
wreckage and reused those parts. And there
yeah,
was multiple,
yeah.
sightings of these guys as well.
They
Not so
really
much
were. They didn't click at first, but
fun.
after a while, they realised, let's get a list up of all the parts which came from that Flight 401 and where did they go? And when they
Mm.
tracked it, they worked out, oh my God, it's all these aircraft in that, which is their aircraft, same types of aircraft, which have got those parts in where these people were claiming to have communication, not just seeing it, but
Oh
sometimes
no, yeah.
communications.
And that's the thing as well. Like you say, there was communication, and on a couple of occasions, it wasn't just like idle
Yeah.
chit chat. There were warnings about you need to do
Warnings.
this because otherwise you're going to be in trouble. And so
Yeah.
that's clear intelligence. It's clear. It's always whether that's just intelligence and they've spotted it or they can see into the future. But there was never any on these planes. None of them crashed. I think the company
None
went
of the
out.
others crashed, no, but they did decide to get the
Yeah,
parts out and that kind of suppressed the stuff. Then it seemed to disappear.
yeah.
But there was a big news thing about that. It got out, it leaked out, and there was a lot of stir in the media about this to the
Mm-hmm.
point where a book was wrote, a movie was done. But there was a lots of people. I mean, you're talking captains of
Oh
other
yeah,
aircraft and stuff,
yeah, yeah.
which not only saw this phantom captain, but would give them warnings and say to take
Mm.
certain directions, or there's a storm coming in, this, that, and the other,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
have you had a look at this at the back of and all
yeah,
sorts. And
yeah.
apparently occasionally he'd just be seen sat there in
Mm.
an empty chair, as if just a normal customer
Yeah,
flying.
yeah, yeah.
And he used to see him in his dress and everything, and it was a bit strange, obviously, but it was absolutely fascinating, that case.
Yeah, and it's a good example as like it's of like you say a spirit or whatever you want to call it attaching itself to something. I mean, I think one last thing to consider before we wrap this up, Steve, is we're speaking again about locations that haven't necessarily got a history to them, but I think what a lot of people don't consider, myself included, a lot of the time, is that what our recorded history is a tiny fraction of we don't it's all guesswork before we
Yeah,
assume it's dinosaurs and nothingness and all that, but there could have been thriving societies that have been wiped out that we know nothing about.
absolutely. We
That could
know
be what we're
very, very,
hearing here. We
yeah,
just don't
we,
know. And
we don't know. We don't know. I mean, there is a lot of people questioning, said, well, is there a limitation to how far back an apparition goes? I mean, why are we not seeing apparitions of dinosaurs all
it's
over the place?
point.
Maybe we do occasionally, who
Loch
knows?
Ness possibly.
Maybe, we just don't know. But, you know, You'd think with the amount of people that have been in the UK, for an example, and it's rich, rich history.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah,
know, and is to be honest, there isn't many, not been many years where there hasn't been battles over one thing or another. I think it's
yeah,
probably the most significant country in the world for its skirmishes and battles.
yeah.
There's
True.
just never much peace in the UK, and that's how it has been throughout history. But you know, you think, well, why do we not see all this? And maybe we do, maybe we don't see some bits. You know, people used to say, well, you know, it's you only see apparitions of things that have a soul.
Right.
You know, so you think, okay, well, if you see a horse or a cat and a dog, then they have souls. And then some people even went as far as, well, yeah, because if they dream, and you can tell if you've got pet dogs, you know, tell
Yeah,
when they're
yeah,
dreaming, you know,
yeah,
the
yeah,
little paws are going and the barking and stuff.
yeah,
Is that something to do to evidence that they have a soul? Do all animals have this, or and insects and things? It's hard to know. But then that got brushed out in the 70s because of inanimate things, you know, things that weren't living, phantom ships,
yeah. I was
phantom
gonna say
boats,
phantom planes.
phantom
Yeah.
planes.
Hmm.
They're not a living organism, and yet they're apparitional.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, that's one of I remember being on a radio podcast 2 years ago now. We were talking about what could UFOs be. That's what we were on about, and it was something that I said. Well, we talked about phantom planes. We said, well, these objects they could be ancient aircraft from thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago that just show up like phantom planes and then bugger off
Just
again. And
apparitions of
yeah,
them. Yeah,
it could be
it
ancient
could be.
aircraft.
Yeah, because apparitions are sometimes seen to be solid,
Mm,
you know, and walk through doors, open up doors and things like that.
yeah, yeah.
Some of them are not. You know, so it's like if you go to Lime Hall Park in Stockport, Disley in the UK, there is an apparition at seen, and it's what's interesting about this particular apparition. It's always seen around a 3 day period
All right.
of the same time, but it doesn't happen every year. But it when it does, it's always around that time, and it's of Lord Lime's funeral procession.
All right.
But what was really interesting is that everybody sees this carriage, this phantom carriage with 6 horses pulling his body in the back, you know, in a coffin of some sort. The top part of the carriage is missing and the horses' heads are missing. Now they don't behead horses.
Mm,
It simply
mm,
is. It's as if like the image, the apparition is only comes up from the ground so far and you don't get the rest. It's like
yeah.
cut off from a TV screen. And then in the back, there's always a wailing woman. And the wailing woman, according to the story, is, you know, she was in love with him and he passed away and she was absolutely heartbroken and was, you know, walking behind. But it's always interesting when you hear about that. It's like it's partial apparition. It's like it's
Yeah.
not quite full, but
Mm.
they say it's seemingly solid. You know, when they see this thing, you can't see through it. It looks real, except for the fact that the top of the carriage and the horse's heads are missing. It's like it only goes up so far.
Yeah,
Crazy.
it is interesting that because, like you say, that comes up a lot, doesn't it? Where people say they report seeing a ghost, whatever they might be, and they say, "But I can only see to its waist." And some people have explained that, well, that's because the floors were different, and that could
Yeah, the
very well
level
be true. But
could
also, it
be.
could be energy. We spoke about this before. It takes energy to manifest.
Well, I think you're actually spot on there because there've been apparitions seen at normal floor level, just like you and me.
Hmm.
But as you look down, they've no feet,
Yeah.
or you know, the extremities are missing. You know, so it's like, well, again, it's partial, but it's not like they're below level of the floor; they're
Hmm.
at the right level. But yet their extremities are missing for some reason. They just kind of fade out for some reason. It's strange.
Yeah, it really could be. It really could be, like you say, just an energy thing. But I mean, Steve, it's going to be a great show. We should probably wrap this up.
Yes, looking forward
But I
to
mean,
it.
thanks very much for joining me as always.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for joining us. Make sure you check the show out with Caroline McKendrick-Gibson. That'll be going out on September the 5th at 9 p.m. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, check us out on social media, and check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for articles, news, and information. Until next time, goodbye and take care.